hey guys, welcome to the Conversations with Interesting People podcast, the show where we sit down with people and talk with them, from all walks of life and all different journeys to hopefully inspire you along your own journey. I'm your host, Braden Collum, and I'm unbelievably excited today for our very first guest, the man, the myth, the legend, Mayor Anthony Williams. How are you?
I'm doing well, and thanks for the invite. And I've been looking forward to this conversation. Well,
thank you for saying yes. I was blown away when I heard that you were up for it. I was like, wait, are you serious? You said yes to this? Let's go. This is awesome. But thank you for doing this. And really just want to have a casual conversation about your life and kind of your journey. And I really want to start there. Talk me through your journey to where you are today. I mean, you're doing a lot of different things. I think people don't understand you do more than just be the mayor of Abilene, Texas. But walk me through your journey. How did you get to this spot? How did you get here? I want to hear your story.
So I'm from Abilene, born and raised here in this community. And I love Abilene. And I'll talk about, in regards to my journey, why I love Abilene so much. But when I was 4 years old, my father was murdered here in our community in a very tragic way. A church in Abilene, the Highland Church of Christ, an elder named Grady Jolly, his wife Nell, heard about my father's brutal murder. And they knocked my mom's door and they asked, could they help? And that act of love and compassion and love really has motivated me to this very day, and that's why I do what I do. So I knocked my mom's door, and for 10 years, a decade, Nell, Grady's wife, mentored my mother.
Wow.
Actually taught her the gospel, and so just made a profound impact. Highland, the church, had a bus ministry where they would pick up kiddos in the neighborhood and called the Joy Bus, and they would give us orange juice and donuts, and for a little fat kid, that was all I needed to hear. And so
got you through the door.
It did. And so I attended that congregation from until I was 18 years old, and just been a blessing to me. And all along the way, I had men and women in that congregation that just reached out to me. And when I look back on it, all those sacrifices they made to a little boy who didn't have a dad. And so I really, this is my almost 20 years in Abilene City Council, but it really started with the act of love and compassion shown to my family years ago.
Yeah. So how did that act of love and compassion translate into you wanting to get into public service?
Well, whenever you deal with that sort of pain, at least for me, dealing with that sort of pain, I never wanted anyone to experience that sort of pain. And when I saw families, individuals that were experiencing circumstances in life that were challenging, I wanted to do something. So I was a junior in college, so in my early 20s, when Abilene for the first time had an issue with gang violence. You actually had West Coast gangs come to Abilene and use Abilene as a connector from El Paso to Dallas. Our first drive-by shootings, and et cetera. So at the time, Baltimore and Maryland had a program called Midnight Basketball, where they would use basketball as kind of a venue where they would encourage young men at risk to be part of, and in doing so, have workshops and guest speakers and et cetera. So Gary McCaleb, mayor at the time, and one of his assistants, Ernest Merritt, went to Austin, Texas, where Baltimore made their presentation about midnight basketball. And because of things occurring in our community, they thought maybe something Abilene should do. So I was asked by Mayor McCaleb at the time to head that program. And so I was Abilene's very first director of late night basketball, we called it, at age 21. And so we took young men from 15 to 18 years old that were at risk. We chose the Sears Rec Center. That's off Ambler in a mostly Latino neighborhood, where at the time we had great concern. And so along with 20 other volunteers, we spent that first summer from 8 or 9 p.m. in the evening to 1 o'clock at night or in the morning on Tuesday and Thursdays mentoring these young men, and with amazing results, by the way. And in fact, some of the early participants, a guy named Terrence Crisp, Terrence, actually, the assistant basketball coach at Abilene High, who is working on a doctorate degree now.
Wow.
And then the head coach at Cooper was a late night basketball participant, and others too. Just made a big difference. And when I saw that, volunteering at a local level can make a difference, it really motivated me. So I got involved with boards and committees throughout the community. Big Brother Big Sisters, the Boys and Girls Club, the Red Cross, a number of different entities I got involved in. And in 2001, I was 32 years old. There was an opening on city council, had any sort of political experience at all. But I was encouraged to run, and we won by 254 votes, actually.
That's
so
awesome.
It was a squeaker.
Yeah.
But I've served in Abilene community as like an official since then. But it began with late night basketball.
What year was this when you got elected?
2001.
Okay.
It was a special election that happened in November, actually. And so, as you know, I was just elected for a delayed election because of COVID. And so you look back, that was 19 years ago, this month when I was first elected to serve.
That's amazing. So. Now, at that point in time, were there many African Americans serving in the Abilene community? Because I grew up in Abilene. I've kind of seen there hasn't been a ton of diversity in the leadership arena, just kind of all over the city. You're kind of paving the way 20 years ago. Was there much pushback being an African American in this community trying to build leadership positions? Or did you feel like, man, open arms, come on? What was your experience?
Well, of course, we live in a community that, you look at our county, and it's 5% African American.
Yeah.
And you look at the city of Abilene, which 84% of the county is the city of Abilene, it's about 7%. But that includes French Robertson and Milton units, our prison units.
Okay, yeah.
So, it was some challenges early on. But in our community, for the most part, we're able to see past color and ethnicity and culture. It's there. I'm not saying that Abilene doesn't face the same issues that are elsewhere in the country and really in the world. But that was never a significant obstacle for me.
Yeah.
But I'm appreciative. You mentioned about the diversity. So in 1978, Dr. Leo Scott was the very first non-Anglo person to be elected in this whole county when he was elected as a city councilman in that year.
That's amazing.
Soon afterwards, Carlos Rodriguez was elected to the Abilene, at the time, city council, because Carlos was actually a trustee and a councilman in our community. Elmer Wright was elected in 1986 on the school board, first African American school board. Val Brailsford in 1990 as second African American school board. Then you had Liz Herrera, Carol Martinez, who were elected to the Abilene City Council as some additional Latinos. And then you had Versi Brown, who's elected in 1996, and Kelvin Kelly later. So it's been a handful. And I do think, hopefully, that the things that I'm doing, others have done, will make it even easier for others to run based on who they are instead of what they are.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you would say that in your own experience, you haven't really felt a ton of pushback just because of the color of your skin in this community.
I would say that. Now, I've had challenges.
Okay,
and certainly I've received emails and letters of derogatory names assigned to me and others, and people say certain things, but that has been the exception and not the rule.
Sure, yeah. And I think it's also interesting, I don't know if you knew this or not, but a few weeks ago, you were actually referenced on Fox News. I don't know if anyone told you or heard. Did you know that?
Yes.
You did know? Yeah. I was listening to the radio. And just so you know, I don't only listen to Fox News. I know there's a lot of opinions. Oh, Braden Fox News. I listen to CNN. I listen to kind of different sources. But you were referenced because it was this, this conversation of race is heightened in our country right now. And there's this interesting situation in Taylor County where we were heavily red. I mean, I have the numbers here. I mean, 72% of Taylor County voted for Trump, but 81% of the county also voted for a black mayor.
Yeah, and in 2016, 86% of Taylor County residents voted for President Trump. And 6 months later, I was elected as the first African American mayor. And so, and really, so I've heard that stat. And by the way, I embrace my ethnicity.
Yeah.
I love being a Texan, and I love being African American. But I hope when history records my tenure at Abilene, I'm not the black mayor, but I was a good mayor. And by the way, he was African American.
He happened to be black, yeah.
And so I've always tried to lead with that. I don't deny. In fact, I embrace my heritage. But like everybody else, I want to have an appraisal and evaluation with my performance that goes beyond the pigmentation of my skin.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I think what's interesting also with those kind of results, with Trump heavily winning Taylor County, but also you heavily winning, have you found that it's been difficult? Because the narrative is Trump supporters are racist, Trump supporters, and I don't want to get too political with it, but really that is kind of the narrative of people who support Trump, conservative white people. However, have you found this weird tension of they also heavily elected me, and I'm a black man?
And so, like, our country, our state, and this city, the world is facing this tension with race and culture. And the country has made tremendous strides over the last 50 years, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
I mean, like you, when I look and see what occurred in Portland and Seattle and Minnesota and elsewhere, I mean, it saddens me. It bothers me. And I think anyone that loves this country, it should trouble you also. But I would make this argument that we have a lot more in common than separates us. And when we can focus on those things that bind us together, it allows us to be better. What I've always tried to do as a leader in this community is never deny the reality of racism and division, but focus on those commonalities.
Yeah.
Focus, what can you and I do that allows Abilene to be better?
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to be partisan. So staunch conservatives, liberals, libertarians, I invite anybody inside the tent that wants to elevate our community. And I think when we have that posture, it allows different people to be around the table of discussion. And when you have diversity of thought and opinion around the table of conversations, that input allows you to produce a better product.
Yeah.
I've always led with that. If you look back at all of my campaigns, I've been consistent from the very beginning because that's how I really feel.
Yeah.
And so again, I love culture. I love diversity. I love learning new things about different groups and cultures. But at the end of the day, I want to focus on the common good of the community.
Yeah. What are some of those things that you think are distracting from, because you talk about like getting past just the labels, but it seems like we're so concerned with the labels. How do we get past these distracting things and really doing some progressive things?
Yeah, and I think the reason why people get fixated on those labels, because for some it's more comfortable to associate with things that you're familiar with and you know. It is easier to have a conversation about subject matters that you are familiar with. It's challenging to think otherwise. It's challenging to even think about things you disagree with.
Yeah.
But I think the growth of the person and an extension of the community is your ability to have those hard conversations and challenge your beliefs. And so, I mean, this country and the beauty of it was founded on discourse.
Yeah.
You know, of people from opposing vantage points having a conversation. At the end of the day, that sort of culture and environment of embracing the differences allows each one of us to elevate who and what we are. And at the same time, our communities and cities and regions and country and the world is better when you have conversations that are not limited to subject matter that you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting. We as people are just way more interested in not stretching ourselves, pushing ourselves into conversations or even actions that aren't familiar within our own histories and stuff like that. So I think that's really important.
Yes. And this thing, I think, some people are more concerned with being right
Yep.
than creating the right relationships.
Exactly.
Why does it have to be a winner and a loser?
Yeah.
Why can't we both win?
Yeah.
Why do we want to create division when you don't have to have division?
Yeah.
I am all for making confrontations when someone needs to be confronted, but I don't think we should have a posture of trying to pick a fight.
Sure.
And so the words you say, the action that you make, all lend to that conversation. And so I try to be very, very mindful of the words I say and the things I do to be an example.
Yeah.
Always willing to stand up and say, that is unacceptable. But before I come to that conclusion, be sure that's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. There's something you touched on a little bit ago that I was really interested to talk to you about coming into this. Okay. And you were talking about how when you're running for office and those type of things, you would receive some really critical things, some really critical words.
Yeah.
And I remember even in this latest election cycle, when you were running again for re-election as mayor, there were some really unbelievably hateful things said to you. And what I'm interested in is because I think in politics, no matter what you do, people are going to hate on you. People are going to criticize you, crucify you. But for you on a personal level, because I think what people forget is just because you're on TV, just because you're in the newspaper, doesn't mean that you're not a human with actual emotions and feelings and wounds and hurts and stuff like that. So how do you, because, for example, like, I won't name who said this, but like on Facebook and Twitter and all these people are calling you trash and people are calling you part of the establishment. On a human level, how do you deal with that kind of, and I'm sure they're calling you worse in your inbox as well.
Yeah, in fact, this past election was my very first election where performance, opinion, philosophy was not at the core of the election conversation, but rather innuendos and really lies.
Yeah.
And really personal attacks on me as just a person, led the way. I never once had any sort of conversation about subject matter I think is important. But what occurred in our community is what is occurring nationwide.
Yeah.
Where we're less about those pertinent business type subject matter and more to these personal hate-filled attacks.
Yeah.
I mean, and for me, I've been doing this a long time, and I made a determination a long time ago as elected official, I was not going to run a popularity contest.
Sure, yeah.
But I also knew what is right, or what I thought was right.
Yeah.
And having said that, when I look back at the last 19 years, I may have voted differently on certain subject matter if I knew what I know now. But at the time, you can only make an opinion on that current data. And so I can separate that.
Yeah.
Now, my wife and my children, it hurts them to see the things that are said sometimes about their loved one.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge for me.
Now, did you always feel like you could take criticism, wear it on your back, and just let it roll right off? Or did you have to grow into like having thick skin?
So I was elected when I was 33 years old. I filed when I was 32. A month later, I was elected. I was 33. And when people say those bad things about you, it was a challenge then. And not to say it doesn't bother me now, but a lot less so now than 19 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I guess this is a principle that I've learned is that I don't allow others to define who and what I am.
Come on, yeah.
I allow my own convictions, my own personal beliefs to evaluate Anthony Williams.
Yeah.
And when I do so, that's those things that may be said about me, of me, have less impact. And I think just moving forward as a nation, we should not allow hateful rhetoric to lead the way.
Yeah.
We ought to reject that and pivot to those things that are core of who we are and what we want to become.
Yeah. So how did you learn to kind of be able to navigate though? Because I'm really interested in this particular subject because our culture is so cynical these days. Yeah. So how did you learn? Because there are people out there who are like, man, I've either felt the brunt of cynicism or I haven't really survived the brunt of cynicism. How have you learned, especially in today's culture as a black man, how have you learned, but beyond just the color of your skin, how have you learned in the public eye to honestly maybe not even care anymore about the negativity?
And I'll say this, my mother, and we use the word hero far too often in our society today, so much so it's kind of like a cliche.
Sure.
But we're a poor family. I mean, we lived in the poorest part of this community. I mean, to this day, the neighborhood I grew up in, the average wage is about $19,000 a year. It's a poor community.
Yeah.
A single mom and 2 sisters, and we struggled. But my mother always carried herself with dignity and respect and didn't allow the current circumstances to define who and what she is. And so I couldn't articulate that then, but I have learned to look past today and focus on tomorrow.
Yeah.
That even in the midst of, as a child, the poverty that I experienced,
yeah,
I had a belief at an early age that was not going to be the final outcome. That was not going to define me.
Yeah.
That I could do things along the way that will allow me to have a different and better life. And so when someone says or does something in that moment, I don't react in that moment. Rather, I look towards other opportunities. The things that were said of me in this last election, I never responded to that.
Yeah. Was that hard for you?
It was very hard.
Yeah.
Because I could have said some things that would have compromised my opponent. In fact, I could have said some things, very factual things, that others would have said that could create all kinds of different circumstances for my opponent. But at the end of the day, I didn't think that was good for our community.
Sure.
I think it was good for what we want to represent. I just believe that as a candidate, I don't have to be negative to be successful.
Yeah.
That I don't have to react to hatred in a way that puts me on that level. And as a community, why can't we do that?
Yeah.
Why can't we refuse to accept that behavior? We don't have to allow others to dictate how we react. I love being proactive, because what being proactive is that no matter what, because we can't control what happens. We can't control circumstances, how a person may or may not act, but what we can control is on a response. And so I chose in that moment and in my life not to respond in kind to those things, but rather rely on my value system and my core beliefs to lead the way.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's an example for others in our community.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly commendable, because really the conversation in politics these days is we would all say those things, but then you have smear campaigns on both sides of like, hey, well, you were crappy to me, so I'm going to match the crap with even more crap. But and there really is this deep, and you see it even more today in people, is this deep desire for unity, but even a deep desire for decency as well, for people like you. So I really commend that you didn't want to just go on, oh, well, you said this about me, well, here's some factual things that you don't want people to know about you, rather than you took the high road to say, man, I'm going to keep my vision and my focus on the future and what I'm convicted of and like where I want to see the city go, and I'm not going to spend time smearing, and because that's not going to get us anywhere.
And I just believe that good conquers evil.
Come on.
I just believe that if you live your life and you do the right things, in the end, that prevails.
Yeah.
I just believe that. It may not be in a certain battle, but in the war, in the end of the day, I believe it prevails.
I love that.
And I've always lived that because I was shown that.
Yeah.
My mother has an incredible story. And although she may not have received some of the success as we defined it of her children in the world's definition of success, she's probably one of the most successful people I've ever seen in my life. And there's others like that. There's others whose shoulders we stand upon. These giants who've been such great examples. And as an American, I want to celebrate that. I want to celebrate that example. Yeah. I want to celebrate how they lived. You look at Nelson Mandela, who I think was the most influential human being of this past century. I mean, I think he was, and here in our country, Dr. King. I mean, just incredible individuals that looked past their current condition.
Yeah.
And focused on the betterment of mankind. You and I are going to have physical death. I may be closer than you. And in 100 years, people may not remember me or remember you. But you know what? There's some things we can do today.
Yeah.
In this moment that mankind a century from now would benefit from. That motivates me.
Yeah.
I have the power, I have the opportunity to do some things that will better mankind.
Yeah. I love that. I think one of my favorite things I've ever heard was that criticism will sell the newspapers, but it's love that builds the future. And so I really love that that's where your head is at. I think it's really refreshing that there's a leader in our community who isn't just buying into the political game. I don't want to just say little things, smear people, criticize people, because it's going to sell the news, it'll sell the newspaper. I'm not worried about that. I may not be the most popular person in the room, but I've got my eyes set on caring for people and loving people really well, and that's what's going to change the community. That's what's going to change the city. And I really think that's amazing that we have a mayor, honestly, a leader in this community who is so convicted in that to say, you know what, I get what the current discourse is, but I don't care, because love is going to build our future. Caring for people is going to build our future, and that's your deep conviction. And it's so obvious in the way that you're leading our city and the things that we've already seen, some amazing things in the city. I think it's awesome that we can sit back and realize, man, it's because of your love and your care for people, not just because of what the haters are saying. You're part of the establishment. Like, what the crap is establishment? What does that even mean? But I'm really grateful to have someone like you really leading and setting the pace.
Well, I appreciate that. I think, I have benefited from just tremendous group of folk in our community who have those same convictions, who spent their lives demonstrating that and been a great example to myself and others. And my hope is I can live a life that mimics that. And so in 15 or 10 or 20 years, someone will look at my example and be motivated, not necessarily to be like me, but like me, trying to be like others who have led in such a significant way in Abilene, Texas.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so what I want to talk about next is, you alluded to it a lot, the future. What are you looking forward to? It can be personal. It can be like on your platform. Like, what is Mayor Anthony looking forward to next?
Well, there's many things happening in Abilene, Texas.
There are, yeah.
Abilene was the 9th city in America to address our homeless veterans.
Yeah.
Abilene was the 4th city in the country that looked at chronic homelessness and did something about it. Those are our neighbors, and that's a project that a number of us have worked years to see to come to fruition. And there's other projects that we can do. And so we may not be able to change things elsewhere, but we have a tremendous opportunity to elevate the quality of life in Abilene, Texas. I want better jobs to be happening in Abilene, Texas, because I believe when a man or a woman has a good paying job, that person has dignity.
Yeah.
And when mom or dad has dignity, the whole family has dignity. I want more Abilenes to have dignity. And so we're working on some things at this very moment that could be very, very significant for Abilene, Texas. And so that really motivates me. I'm looking forward to working with other leaders and stakeholders to allow that to come to be.
Yeah. How long do you think you'll want to be mayor of Abilene?
Well, my term expires in 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And I really can't see me serving as mayor after that.
We won't hold you to that, because a lot can change. You have the right to change your mind.
But I want to do some other things. there'll be some others that will step in and serve Abilene in a mighty way.
Yeah.
Life is short on this side of eternity.
Yeah.
It really is. And so I have some things I want to be able to do. I'm not sure what they are.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to what that brings for me and my family.
Yeah.
My wife, we've married 31 years.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
How many kids do you have?
I have 3 children.
3 kids.
3 children. And
Are they in Abilene?
So Anthony Jr. Is in DFW.
Okay.
John is here in Abilene, although he's going to the military in 2 weeks. And Alyssa is actually in Florida, who will have our first grandchild in a mere few weeks.
No way.
And so I'm looking
Congratulations.
forward to... I'm looking
number
forward,
1, grandchild number 1?
Number 1.
Oh, man.
So I'm looking forward to being a pawpaw. I'm looking forward to John's service to our military and Anthony's endeavors. And I really want to spend time with my wife enjoying, future grandchildren and other adventures.
Yeah, that's amazing. So is mayor just the first? Are you going to run for president 2024? Are you going to run for state level, national level?
I really had no desire to be mayor. 30 years ago when I started, when we started late night basketball, and I really don't have a burning desire to be like the official pastor Abilene. Now, having said that, people have called me, and I've taken those phone calls. I've had those conversations, and so you never say never about anything.
Sure,
but what I will do is I am committed to spending the rest of my life helping my fellow man at whatever that leads me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, you mentioned this, and I was curious about this because I'm interested really in politics in general, but you mentioned phone calls. Who's like the most famous politician? Have you talked to Trump? Have you talked to any presidents? I'm curious about that. Like, who's actually the question I had for you, and I think I wrote it down, was like, who's the most famous phone number you have?
Oh, gosh, I haven't talked to President Trump or any president, not President Trump,
yet.
But I had dinner with President Bush. I had dinner with him at a event 4 or 5 years ago.
Were you at his table?
I was right beside him.
What?
I was.
This is post-presidency?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so
that's pretty cool.
Really cool. We had a good conversation. Of course, I've talked to a number of different senators and others. I hate to name drop. That sounds.
No, this is the platform to name drop because I'm really interested. It's really cool to me.
I mean, but I've taken some phone calls from some political giants.
Yeah. Do you answer the phone call? And you're like, who in the? Anthony Williams from Abilene, Texas. Who is this guy? Like, I'm taking this phone call. Have you had those moments?
I have with some strategists and others, and so. Very interesting phone calls, and we'll see what that looks like down the road.
Yeah, I mean, you're a young man. I know you joked about your age, but you're young. You look good.
You
look good. And man, I just thank you for all you've done for this community and this city. It really is impactful, and I'm excited to see where you take our community. You're leading the way. You've done some amazing things already. I mean, Abilene. There's a big announcement recently about some possibilities of enormous job possibilities coming to the city. Yes. And I know in some way you're involved in that conversation, and I'm really grateful for all that you're doing for this community. And thankful that you took the time to sit down. I mean, you could have been doing a million other things.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate you just trying to highlight the number of positive things that are occurring in our community.
Yeah.
People should know about that. We could have 85% of the things are going extremely well, but we focus on the 15% of the things that lend themselves to opportunity. And so I'm an 85%er.
Love it. Well, I thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully we get to do this again soon. Man, you're awesome. I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.